Thank you for coming. My name is Pam Jones. As Bob said, I am not employed by the Department of Food and Agriculture, and I am here to basically be a moderator to make sure that the last person gets the same opportunity to speak as the first person. So we're going to start with Lynn Feijen and Suzanne Balmaseda. Just go ahead and use this. Pardon me?
Are we supposed to?
You can stand up or just it's casual enough.
Yeah. Okay. I'll stand up here.
That's fine.
Greetings. Since the California Department of Food and Agriculture's job is not only to promote agriculture, but to feed and protect the people of California, I would like to just remind you that there really has been no investigative work done at all except on the part of individual citizens about the effects of the spraying that was done in both Santa Cruz and Monterey. And there are testimonies, long, lengthy, videotaped testimonies by people who have done on-the-ground investigations, and you can refer yourselves to that, to those particular testimonies. I think they're very important for you to understand what the detailed results were. There are people who found thousands of birds who were dead, lying in the yellow sludge of Checkmate. There were people who saw bees in their gardens go mad wearing the yellow sludge of Checkmate. There were human beings who were vastly changed in their metabolisms and in their physical functions, including women who began to bleed again post-menopause. Hello? Including a child who almost died in the hospital. I don't believe from the timeline and timetable that you have laid out for your environmental impact report that you are going to be able to do or willing to do any kind of thorough environmental impact report prior to trying to convince us that you are going to use whatever you're going to use to promote either the health of people of California or California agriculture. And I think that all of the methods that you have listed there are methods that have been shown to be inept and useless and also dangerous to human health. All of the chemicals and all of the pesticides are dangerous to human health. It just so happens, and I don't know if you know, that it rained the day after the first or the second application of Checkmate to Santa Cruz. So that means that all that crap just went right into the waters. All the waterways, the oceans. What I want is not only a checking out of human health and bee health and bird health and the health of all the animals. I want a checking out of what happened to all those poisonous chemicals as they went into the waterways and as they went into the oceans. And my advice to you is to take New Zealand's advice. Listen to it. Do not ignore it. Shut this program down. They've told you that very clearly. Australia has told you that very clearly. They said nothing worked. And this little critter is only in the numbers of 20,000. Can you imagine what will happen to California agriculture if you spew out from the hind end of planes or whatever you do millions and millions of sterile moths? They may not be able to screw and make babies, but they can eat. I mean, if you're worried about California agriculture, let's talk about just how we're going to deal with this situation so that we don't ruin our very important organic agriculture business, and so that we take the advice that whole countries have given us. And if you're worried also about the quarantine, then let's fight the quarantine. Let's not poison ourselves and fall on our swords for a USDA that just wants to put us in a corner so that it can make a lot of money. Thank you.
Suzanne, and then Fred Feijen.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Balmaseda, Balmaseda. I am representing many people from the Bay Area and beyond who could not be here today. I am a mom of 2 boys, ages 3 and 5. My 3-year-old has a respiratory ailment which is called croup. I would like to know how this eradication plan will affect my son. Permethrin, which may be put on trees and utility poles, is a neurotoxin and a known carcinogen. It is very toxic to the already fragile bee population. I am requesting that you put your funding and expertise to research and solve the bee population, which is already a risk to our agriculture. Have you researched how this current eradication plan will affect the bee population? I want you to research how this is going to affect the bee population that's already so low. The PUC has the state of California rules for overhead electric construction prescribed by the PUC has a rule number 34 against foreign attachments on utility poles. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. The ground spray would contain either VT or spinosad, an insecticide. I do not approve of having either of these toxic chemicals sprayed in my neighborhood or my surrounding cities. There are many babies, children, pregnant moms, and the elderly who may get, in my neighborhood. How will this plan affect their health? This has not been addressed in the environmental impact report. What are the long-term health effects, such as cancer, that may result from this pesticide exposure? There's no research on the long-term health effects in the environmental impact report. How will the sterile moth release affect the natural predators? Will they be overfed? Will we have an overgrowth of the natural predators of the light brown apple moth? I want that researched. How will this affect people with asthma and other respiratory problems? And I also want to finish with, I am a special education teacher. I work with kids who are medically fragile. How is this going to affect my students? Thank you.
Fred, and then Raquel Grossie.
Hi, my name is Fred Feijen, F-A-J-E-N. My comments are short. I have a personal issue. I've been diagnosed with something called pulmonary fibrosis, which means that I don't have as much lung capacity as I'd like to have, or as I should have. I've been told that my condition is stable, and so it shouldn't affect my life expectancy or how much fun I'm having. But I like to go to the Bay Area and visit my grandchildren. I'm Suzanne's dad, and she has those 2 little boys she talked about are my grandsons. If there's going to be something that's dangerous to my health, I won't be going down to see them. So I'd like to know what work has been done to research issues such as mine, and what a confidence level is that I can still visit my grandchildren. Thank you.
Next is Raquel Grossie, and then Kate Bernier.
Hello, my name is Raquel Grossie. Last name is spelled G-R-O-S-S-I. I just want to start by saying thank you for giving us an opportunity to ask these questions and provide comments. I have a number of concerns with your revised plan to eradicate the light brown apple moth. First and foremost is why we are pursuing this eradication in light of evidence from reputable entomologists and scientists that it is not necessary, as well as from other countries, including all of Europe, that does not try to eradicate it. So I would like you to do a little more investigation on that side. I'm hearing a lot about you're looking at all of these different ways to eradicate, but where's the research on whether or not it's really necessary? I'd also like you to look a little bit more at what would happen if we were to declassify the moth, and instead of eradicate it, we should be subsidizing and helping the farmers who are impacted by the current quarantines. I think once we take lead, you'll find that other trading partners, Canada and Mexico in particular, will follow suit. Secondly, while I appreciate the effort to remove aerial spraying over urban environments, the plan still reserves the right to aerially spray in forested and rural areas. When will you be releasing the maps of these areas? As a mother of an asthmatic son and the wife of an asthmatic husband, I'm very concerned about pesticide drift from local forested areas such as Tilden Park. I'm also concerned for those who live in rural areas. In fact, my family, parents, grandparents, brothers, family, niece, nephew, all live on a dairy farm in Nevada, California, where 2 moths have been trapped and they are going to be pursuing with twist ties. However, what's to say that they won't be coming down with aerial spray in those areas soon, as obviously there's a lot of land. Their ranch is 500 acres. Speaking of the twist ties, I have a couple of specific questions. The twist ties were not created to eradicate moths. They were created to control them in agricultural areas, not overpopulated areas. That said, I suspect they may be ineffective, in which case you're left to ground spray with insecticides that you have mentioned already, BTK or spinosad. I was pleased to hear that at this time, it sounds like you don't have any specific areas that you're planning to ground spray with that, but I suspect that will change in the near future. When will those schedules be announced? How will we find out? Will you be contacting the individuals whose homes are going to be sprayed with the substance? Personally, if those substances are sprayed, I'll still have to look at moving my family. In looking at research on these specific insecticides, I am very interested in if you have looked at how BTK in particular impacts digestive tracts and lungs. There are studies that show that farmers who have been chronically exposed to BTK in the fields, when they went and took samples from their nostrils, their lungs, and their intestines, they found BTK there, the same bacteria. How that affects them in the long term is questionable, but I think it is something that you could research. I'm happy in a formal comment later to provide citations to these studies that I'm mentioning. My son has a chronic digestive disorder along with his asthma, and I clearly will not take any health risks for him. I will be moving, something I do not want to do. I also want to know if you've looked at spinosad and its impact. Specifically, a number of the inert ingredients are known to be endocrine disruptors. So whether it's with the permethrin, whether it's with the pheromone, the spinosad, the BTK, I'm interested if you're looking at the man-made chemical inert ingredients and how they break down what the long-term chronic effects of those are. In particular, spinosad was noted in a lab test with rats to show that it inflames and diseases the thyroid and other endocrine glands, such as the adrenals. Personally, I have endocrine disease, and that's not something I want to expose myself to either. The permethrin has already been mentioned as a neurotoxin. I have great concerns for that. Washes down from the utility poles and the trees. It goes into our waterways, neighborhood cats, etc. I think you have the picture. You mentioned earlier on that you would be, if this fails, looking at classical biological controls. I would like to see an expansion of what that exactly means for us. I'm also interested in, you've mentioned that the sterile insected moths have been used successfully with other eradications. I would like to see more information on that on your website to research. I'm curious what numbers were released into populations and how that impacted their ecosystem. Compare that with the number that you're planning to release for the light brown apple moth. If it's a great number more, then we might have a very different impact on our ecosystem. It's also noted that you've expanded this to the entire state practically, which I suspect is to get your entire EIR kind of taken care of and packaged in the event that you decide to move through with these eradication plans elsewhere. Right now, I'm assuming it's going to be focused in similar areas where we have the moths trapped, but I am curious if you could expand on that. Okay, it looks like my time is up, and I just wanted to get clarification that you are indeed not going to be moving forward with any of these eradication plans until the EIR is complete. Thank you.
So Kate Bernier and then Paulina Borsa.
Sorry.
No problem.
I'm Kate Bernier, B-E-R-N-I-E-R. So, how will you justify the water use for the spray in drought-stricken California? Somebody has already talked about the water getting into the groundwater, which always finds its way into the ocean. And we desperately need these oceans and their ecosystems now to absorb our heavy carbon footprint. Without it, we're goners. How will you protect us from benzene, a known carcinogen, 2 molecules of which are contained in the LBAM spray? I'm giving you 1,000 abstracts found on the NIH government website linking benzene to cancer. DDT contains 2 molecules of benzene, and maybe that's why it was banned. The LBAM spray structure is very closely related to Agent Orange, or TCDD, which also contains 2 benzene molecules. How can you protect us from the birth defects, prostate cancer, lymphoma, etc., that Agent Orange relatives might also cause? How will you protect the state from the lawsuits relating to the Agent Orange relative? I remind you the 9th U.S. Court of Appeals ordered the Department of Veterans Affairs to pay retroactive benefits to Vietnam War veterans exposed to Agent Orange. Again, I repeat, the LBAM relative. Evolution dictates survival of the fittest, which in this case will be the apple moth, not us, as it becomes resistant to our pesticides. And do we really need to be inundated with millions of spray-resistant moths? The same for mosquitoes. You spray the mosquitoes, they become resistant. And, well, if any of you are researchers, I think a fascinating word about benzene that has been found since these studies were completed. The unique spacing of the benzene molecule creates an electromagnetic field flux, which creates the cancer, a fact not known at the time of the 1,000 studies. I'm sure there are enough creative folks in California to look to nature to find our way out of this. Pesticides never work. And I want to know how Monsanto is involved in this. They own Agent Orange, and I'm sure they don't want Monterey and Santa Cruz to continue with their organic farming. I believe they are the epicenter of organic farming. Please help us. If the spray kills us, it's going to spray you and kill you and your offspring too. Thank you. I have a lot of these copies.
Okay.
It gives the structure of the molecules. I don't want to have to carry them back to the car.
Okay, we have Paulina Borsa next, and then Helen Azureus. Also, if any of you have come in later, if you want to speak, there are speaker cards in the back of the room. We're asking you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. Paulina, you've got the mic there? Okay.
I think so. My name is Paulina Borsa. That's Paulina, last name Borsook, Borsook. I spoke at the Santa Cruz scoping meeting in February, so I'm not going to repeat here what I said then, but I have a few additional concerns. Santa Cruz this summer, I would say, was the heart of the California firestorm of 2008. And we were subjected to wildfire smoke basically from May till maybe this week was the first week it's cleared. So I'm wondering if you guys have done any research whatsoever on what happens to any of these materials, the excipients, the active ingredients, the plastics, the splats, the housing, any of this stuff if it goes up in flames, particularly when you're still planning to spray in rural areas. And how does this affect the ecosystems? What happens to the combustion byproducts? I don't think that's been addressed. And as far as I know, we're in the middle of global warming and increasingly drier and hotter California. I have another concern. The original LBAM eradication program mentioned the use of chlorpyrifos in nurseries and wholesale grower facilities if any LBAM was spotted. And I'm wondering if you're still insisting that those nurseries and wholesalers use chlorpyrifos. And if you're looking at the environmental impact of that, and again, if those things burn, I don't want to think about what happens to it. And that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Helen, and then Anne Maurice.
My name is Helen Azureus. That's spelled K-O-Z as in zebra, O-R-I-Z as in zebra. I work with Stop the Spray East Bay in Alameda County. I would like the following points to be addressed in the programmatic environmental impact report for the light brown apple moth eradication project. Number one, because the LBAM program has changed and expanded to include almost the entire state, new scoping sessions should be held in the Bay Area and all potentially affected areas. The public must be notified well in advance of these scoping sessions. Number two, the NOP states that the project is not expected to result in either cumulative or direct or indirect adverse effects to human health and the environment. This description of the probable environmental effects of the project is inadequate, violating CEQA section 15082A1. We know that there were 643 complaints of adverse health effects following the checkmate spray, and the negative health and environmental effects of Bt, spinosad, and permethrin are widely known. Number three, there are no long-term studies of the effects of pheromones on humans. Therefore, CDFA cannot substantiate that biopesticide products are safe. We need to adhere to the precautionary principle before exposing large populations to untested biopesticides. This includes the pheromone checkmate spray, permethrin splat mixed with pheromones, and the pheromone impregnated twist ties. Number four, a programmatic EIR is an insufficient environmental review to address a program with a wide geographic scope that includes almost the entire state of California. The impacts of treatments at each specific site must be addressed. Number five, because LBAM is found in a wide geographical area spanning 10,000 square miles, it is well established and is impossible to eradicate. Scientists say the proposed treatments simply will not work. Number six, twist ties control LBAM in agricultural settings and are not designed as an eradication tool in residential areas. Twist ties have not been tested for long-term human exposure, and the inert ingredients have not been disclosed. Number seven, the release of millions of sterile moths requires its own EIR to assess the potential environmental impacts on the existing ecosystem. Number eight, damage from the effects of the spray in Monterey and Santa Cruz counties has not been adequately investigated, and further treatments should be halted pending a full investigation. This includes 643 complaints of adverse health effects, the deaths of numerous seabirds, reports of animal deaths such as dogs, cats, goats, rabbits, and fish, disappearance of songbirds and bees from residential gardens, and the worst red tide in the Monterey Peninsula's history. The eradication program is not safe. Number nine, pheromones are intended for control purposes, not eradication. The eradication program is not effective. Number 10, independent experts estimate that LBAM has been living in California for at least 10 to 50 years, contrary to CDFA's claims that the moth is a recent arrival. There is no evidence of crop damage which suggests that LBAM is being kept in check by natural predators. The eradication program is not necessary. So I'm going to conclude with these comments that I'd like to say. The real program is not LBAM, but trade policies which are driving the entire eradication program, resulting in punishing quarantines on farmers and nurseries, threatening to drive them out of business. We must demand CDFA and USDA revisit trade policy and declassify LBAM as a quarantinable pest, which would lift the quarantines, remove the trade barriers, and therefore end the need to eradicate LBAM. Furthermore, the Biopesticide Industry Alliance, whose stated goal is to, quote, advance the global market for biopesticides, of which Sutera is a member, in cooperation with CDFA and USDA, are engaged in a coordinated effort to promote biopesticides as environmentally friendly products and are working to develop markets for these chemicals here in the US and abroad. This characterization of biopesticides as safe and natural is unsubstantiated and misleading. Pheromones are synthetically manufactured chemicals that have not undergone long-term testing for human health effects of environmental impacts. When pheromones are combined with inert ingredients, some of which have documented toxic effects, the results can be devastating. We have already witnessed the harmful impacts of Sutera's pheromone spray on the Central Coast. 2 children almost died and thousands of people got sick. This constitutes a grand experiment on the people of California. It is time to end this ill-conceived eradication program, which is not safe, not effective, and not necessary. Thank you very much.
Okay, Anne Maurice, and then Constance Parker.
Anne Maurice, Ad Hoc Committee for Clean Water. That's MAURICE. I think with the budget problems that we have and the potential for staff salary cuts and so forth, that CDFA would be well advised to get aerial spray off the table and not spend any money in the EIR researching it. I think there's been enough controversy regarding the spray in Santa Cruz, and the point was well taken that it's not possible to analyze the extent of the potential damage that was done there to public health or to the environment. I think it would be wise just simply to consider something else. So just take that off the table. And as far as spraying so-called remote areas, I think that people are sophisticated enough to realize that there is no area in the state that is remote. We're all connected, whether by water or by food. So we think that it would be more appropriate not to waste any more money researching it. Then I'd like to look into this issue of the light brown apple moth existing in New Zealand and Australia, and the controversy whether or not it has been here for a long time, has been established here, or if it's introduced recently. From my point of view, either way, what would prevent a new introduction? Consumers demand products that are out of season. We eat products that come from the Southern Hemisphere. Some of us don't even know what out of season means anymore. And the world is based on imports at this point. So if we continue to import these products, I don't see how just preventing intrastate or interstate movement of host plants is necessarily going to keep this pest or any other pest from reappearing. Because we continue to import from countries like New Zealand, Australia, where the light brown apple moth exists, and then there's a whole host of other agricultural pests. And I don't think there's anyone in the room here who would deny that there is such a thing as an agricultural pest. So how do we deal with it? Are the CDFA and the USDA equally tough on this issue of imports? We have domestic quarantines. What about import quarantines? Are we willing to go into something like that? Or what about 100% inspections? What's the level of inspections that are going on right now? The US is notorious for lax inspections, and that other countries engaging in port shopping because they know that they can get any product into the food products and others into this country without being inspected because there's such a low level of inspectors on our imports. So I suspect that there will be a parade of pests coming into this country. We've got to decide on an overarching overall policy of how we're going to deal with this, because it'll just be one after another. So we'd like to see a section on the percent of inspection of commercial agricultural products that are coming into the country. In other words, host plants from New Zealand and Australia, to use this light brown apple moth as kind of a bellwether, as a way of establishing how we're dealing with this problem, generally speaking. What's the percentage of host plants that are imported for research purposes that are inspected? For zoos, arboretums, universities. they're not exempt. They're possible. It's possible also for individuals coming in from other countries to bring these things in inadvertently. I mean, that's the whole history of our country and every other country with increasing trade is inadvertent introduction of exotics, including people. So, and all of the concerns that we have, I mean, even if we were to decide that it were possible to eradicate it, what's to prevent another light brown apple moth from being introduced tomorrow? So now moving away from that problem into how do you deal with insect, what we call insect pests. And nobody has really talked about sustainable biodynamic approaches and a nutritional approach. And it looks to me like we're dealing with the natural world and agriculture in the way many of us deal with human disease problems. We wait until the disease establishes itself, then we look for something to do about it, okay? A nutritional approach, which is the one that's sustainable and biodynamic approach, believes that healthy plants can ward off pests and ward off diseases. They have communication systems, they have immune systems just as we do. And I would like to see a section in this EIR devoted to healthy plants, disease prevention, not just assuming that plants are sitting there inert like pieces of furniture waiting to be attacked by a pest or a pathogen. And I just happened to bring with me an issue of Acres magazine, which is full of information in that regard, and I hope that that's a good direction for the department to take. Thank you.
Thank you. Constance Parker and then Frank Agar.
Well, hello, I'm Constance Parker. I'm with the Environmental Health Network of California, which is a 20-year-old support and advocacy group for people who have been chemically injured and or are chemically sensitive. We have a whole plethora of concerns, of course, with this entire program and have right from the start, and you will be receiving next week some extensive written comments from us on the EIR. So I'm not going to go over all of that right now. I just want to hit a couple of high points that are of particular concern to us. And all the ones that I'm going to talk about here circle around the issue of pheromone-based eradication systems. I know that there are many other things that are potentially going to be employed besides that, but this is one of the areas that we have the most concern about and that we feel really has not been adequately looked at on a couple of parameters that are very, very important to us. Basically, to us, the whole issue of pheromones, whether they're sprayed from the air rurally or over urban areas, or whether they're delivered by twist ties or some other means, presents a set of problems that to us are somewhat fundamentally different than the problems that we can face with other pesticides. And all those problems revolve around the fact that pheromones accomplish their purpose in an eradication program by being there constantly in the environment at their active state levels for long periods of time. This is very different than older generation traditional pesticides, which because they are insecticidal, can be at their lethal concentrations for relatively short periods of time and then are often designed deliberately to degrade relatively quickly. If you're, put yourself in the position of a person who has some kind of a sensitivity reaction to a particular chemical or group of chemicals. And I don't mean something minor like you get a few sneezes or a little headache. I mean you have life-threatening heart arrhythmias, or you get life-threatening sudden onset asthma, or you can get extremely serious seizures. These are the kind of people that I'm talking about and that our groups are full of. If you're talking about something that's only going to be at the concentration that's high enough to do that to you for a few weeks, you potentially have the ability to leave and come back. Well, now, for some people that isn't true, but at least the potential is there. With any of these pheromone systems, if they're being employed somewhere near a sensitive person or a sensitive group of people, By their very nature, in order to do their job, they have to be at concentrations that will do that for potentially months or longer at a time. What this fundamentally means to many of the people in our group, and we've seen this happen with some of the people in Santa Cruz and Monterey, is that they're essentially toxically evicted from their homes without recourse. They have to go someplace else because there's no going away and coming back. And that's a very, very devastating thing to put people through. Now, this is probably not a problem that has emerged so much with the pheromones in any kind of an agricultural setting, simply because the numbers of people that are exposed in that setting are not nearly as high. When you port this particular technology to a more urban or suburban setting, you're necessarily going to find at least a few people that are going to be sensitive to some part of it. And it creates this problem just by its very nature. And that's something that we haven't seen evaluated in any of the environmental reports. So that's one of the things that we are specifically asking be addressed in any sort of environmental impact report, is the effect on sensitive populations, not just of the pheromone itself, but of the breakdown products of any delivery system, and of what it means for sensitive populations that these would have to be at this steady state level for months on end, because we see that as just being a huge problem that really, really hasn't been looked at. There's two other specific things about the pheromones that we also think just haven't been addressed at all. One is, how do you remove them from water? If you're going to be doing that over, rural areas, they're liable to get into the water supply. People in our community want to know, what kind of filtration media, will we have to be putting on our faucets to get this out? Again, speaking for, a subgroup of people who are sensitive, who may need to just be totally removed from this thing. That's something that we want to know. Another issue that we had thought of before, but that has just been hammered home by what we've all lived through the next few months, is what happens when this stuff burns. Because even if you're not spraying it over urban areas, if you're spraying it over areas where people might potentially eventually be collecting wood that would be used, for burning in the colder parts of the year, or that might burn in an uncontrolled fire situation like what we've had, you're talking about, again, a lot of people getting exposed to this, and we feel that that's a parameter that may have to be taken into consideration. We have things to say about other parts of the program too, and as I said, those will be in our written comments, which will be submitted next week, but these are the parts that I wanted to speak on today. Thank you.
Next is Frank Agar, and then Dr. Rafael Mendel.
Frank Agar, EGGER, President of the North Coast Rivers Alliance. I ask the following be addressed in the DEIR. What is the purpose of the CDFA refusing to hold scoping sessions in the known so-called infested counties of the Monterey and San Francisco Bay areas? Why expand the project from 12 to 58 counties and include the Central Valley when no LBAM have been found and probably never will be found there? Why do you continue to push an eradication program when you are fully aware that LBAM can be controlled but not eradicated? The noticing procedure, including listing of 5 key components, is not in compliance with CEQA. The key components as listed on page 5 of your NOP are sketchy at best. How will you prepare an EIR based on the very minimal info you have provided? Why is reclassification of LBAM from a Class A to Class C pest not listed as an alternative? If I expand the project from 12 to 58 counties and include the Central Valley when no LBAM have been found and probably never will be found there, why do you continue to push an eradication program when you are fully aware that LBAM can be controlled but not eradicated? The noticing procedure, including listing of 5 key components, is not in compliance with CEQA. The key components as listed on page 5 of your NOP are sketchy at best. How will you prepare an EIR based on the very minimal info you have provided? Why is reclassification of LBAM from a Class A to Class C pest not listed as an alternative? You have stated approximately 25,000 LBAMs are in California. Your sterile insect moth program technology with will disperse up to 20 million moths every 7 to 14 days using an auger method for fixed-wing aircraft. How will you mitigate this massive pest problem that you will create? What kind of damage can we expect from the tens of millions of moths that you will release? How can you guarantee they are sterile? What if they are not all sterile? How will LBAM predators react to millions of moths in the food chain? Will we attract more predators than our ecostructure can absorb? Will the sterile moths be treated with pheromones before released? What will 20 million moths released per county every 7 to 14 days survive on? Why do you continue to hold farmers hostage by quarantining their crops when, according to the Monterey Superior Court judge, there is no and has been no crop damage in California? Component number 2 states aerial application may be used for heavily infested and inaccessible areas, heavily forested agriculture. I did not see the new aerial spray map, and I'm wondering why it's not available to the public. Will the pheromone be checkmate? Will you fully disclose in all inert ingredients, or will the pesticide be a secret formula? Will you be allowed to treat agricultural growing areas with both organic, agricultural growing areas, both organic and traditional, with a pheromone and other pesticides? Will the organic farmers lose their organic status if the new, both disclosed and undisclosed chemicals are sprayed on them? How many native wasps will be released per week, and what are the adverse impacts on the land? Will you identify all ingredients, including inerts, in the BTK or spinosad, same as above B in the tristis? Your document states new formulations of pheromone are now available and have been tested. Will you disclose what the new formulations are, including the inerts and the test results? How will you comply with the Endangered Species Act? What tests will the DFG perform to determine the impact on listed species? You say the DPR will monitor pesticide applications for quality control as well as effectiveness. Who will monitor for the adverse impacts on public health? Will they have access to the inert lists of ingredients? The OEM report was totally insufficient. Who will be the next report? Who will do the next report? Who conducted the 6-pack tests? What kind of rigs were used in conjunction with the ground spraying of the urban neighborhoods? Would it be similar to mosquito vector control district fogging trucks? Lastly, 45 days, a 45-day comment period is totally insufficient. I request a minimum of 90 days to respond to the draft environmental impact report. Thank you very much.
Dr. Rafael Mendel, and then Lynn Corwin.
Okay, Rafael Mendel, M-E-N-D-E-L. Many of the points have been covered. I'll try to cover a few that haven't been mentioned. There are published reports, and I've heard this from Dr. Dan Harder and from Jim Carey, that in 274 previous cases that the CDFA has attempted of insect species eradication since 1982, in 274 previous cases, there has been no successful eradication in any case. And I put it to you that you will not be able to eradicate this moth. You will simply be able to control it, which you could do with much simpler and safer methods, such as the ones used in New Zealand. Right now, after New Zealand tried to use some of the methods you're attempting, which resulted in, for example, using pesticides, resulted in increased numbers of apple moth due to downturn in the predators' numbers. New Zealand has now gone back to using integrated pest management, and I put it to you, have you looked into that approach, such as using, stop not using so much monocropping and use more intercropping? There are also methods of planting certain plants within fields which attract beneficials. Also use of organic soil components, soil nutrients, which improve the health of the plants and make them more resistant to insect pests. Have you looked into those? In New Zealand, they use those methods, plus very occasional insect growth regulators, which are relatively safe substances. And with just those simple methods, in 2006, out of 300 300 import cases from New Zealand. Only 12 were found to have the apple moth in the import, and that's just using integrated pest management. Those 12 cases were then sent to other countries who accepted them. I'm a doctor of chiropractic and naturopathy, and I can tell you in recent years there's been a huge increase in immune problems and environmental sensitivity problems that I've been seeing amongst my patients. And I think this is due to the overall chemical load that we have in our environment. There's just a huge amount of chemicals, and people's immune systems are overloaded. Now, have you considered, by increasing the overload of these toxic chemicals with your use of chemicals from this program, what effect it will have on people? Have you considered what effect it would have on the enzyme detoxification system, such as the glutathione S-transferase enzyme system, which when it gets overloaded with chemicals, it can no longer effectively detoxify human bodies? Have you considered, I'm asking you to consider all these things, spraying in rural areas? We're wondering, we'd like to see the map of where you're spraying. We've seen no map. And here in Marin County, where I'm from, and by the way, I'm associated with the Stop the Spray Marin group, we're very concerned that areas like Mount Tam, which is a big watershed area for our drinking water, will be full of chemicals such as Checkmate or whatever other chemicals you're planning on using there, and will get into our water system. And just to say a little more about water systems, from the book Silent Spring, which came out in the 60s, here's a quote. "It is not possible to add pesticides to water anywhere without threatening the purity of water everywhere. Seldom, if ever, does nature operate in closed and separate compartments, and she has not done so in distributing the Earth's water supply. Except for what enters streams directly as rain or surface runoff, all the running water of the Earth's surface was at one time groundwater. And so in a very real and frightening sense, pollution of the groundwater is pollution of water everywhere, meaning all lakes, all rivers, oceans as well. So this, of course, threatens wildlife and humans." Let's see. Again, this may have been stated, but I'd like to hear what are the formulations. We're waiting to hear what are the formulations, what are the chemicals you're planning on using in these various methods. And I think it's very unfair to the public to not give this information. If you were going to spray or whatever you're going to do in an area, I think I'm asking that you give at least 30 days notice to whatever properties are going to be affected. And just searching here. Well, I think that has the CDA addressed the possibility that the LBAM population is insignificant and will not cause claimed agricultural damage. In fact, you have, I'll finish in a moment, you have not shown that there has been any damage caused by LBAM, even in the court cases in Monterey and Santa Cruz, where the judge asked for proof. No proof was supplied.
Okay, next is Lynn Corwin and then Mary Beth Brangan.
Hi, I'm Lynn Corwin. I'm also from Marin Stop the Spray, Corwin. I have a couple of questions. Most of the things that I wanted to say have been covered. But I wanted to know who is going to be doing the EIR and what are their political affiliations, and are they connected to the state? Are they connected to the pesticide companies? Are they connected to the Department of Agriculture? And the other concern that I have that I have not heard being addressed is, what about the bees? The bees are dying. And Einstein said that we have about 4 years after the bees die. I have heard that the pesticides that in Checkmate do affect the bees. I don't know what pesticides you're going to be using for the, I don't know if you're going to be using Checkmate or other pesticides, but I urge you to look at the effect that they have on the bees. Thank you.
Are not detectable. They can't be determined in terms of how many there are or even whether they exist in the water. And a lot of those chemicals come from chlorinated pesticides, chlorine-based pesticides. And among the chlorine-based pesticides are included elements such as toluene and benzene. And these chemicals cannot be tested for. And so I want a caveat, at least, if this EIR is published, that the scientists really cannot do appropriate testing for these chemicals. They cannot be detected by any known human tests, not by carbon testing, not by anything. Thank you.
And real short.
And Maurice, since so many people are concerned about toxic impacts on bees, and that's ad hoc committee included, there are other toxins which are being used for other eradications, and perhaps the CDFA can find a way to incorporate this into this review, is comparing what you're proposing here with things that are being done right now. And one of those toxins that people need to know about is a substance called imidacloprid, which was proposed for the glassy wing sharpshooter control issue, which is highly toxic to honeybees. And I, for one, would like to know the extent to which imidacloprid is being used for the glassy wing sharpshooter program because of its high toxicity to honeybees, and speculate whether or not imidacloprid is responsible. That is a substance that is marketed for flea control on dogs. It's one of the most widely used flea control techniques around, and anybody who has a dog is probably using it. Thank you.
Okay. Today's, your verbal comments are not the only opportunity. If you think of something else and you want to send it in via email or on this form, fax it in, send it in, that's fine as well. Just get it in, if you would, by the date. And again, the date is
21st.
the 21st of August. And it doesn't matter, you know, if it comes email or faxed or sent in. It's all the same. What they will do is take the comments, they'll put them into groups, and they will include those topics in their review. There will be a draft environmental impact report that will come out, again, it was indicated, and there will be additional meetings. So anything else you all would like to say, Susan? Bob? Jim? Okay. Thank you very much.
Of your applications, be it surfactants or emulsifiers or any of the other components or the so-called inerts or in the active ingredients even. That is a favorite new technological toy, and I'm very concerned about that. So I'd like to know any nanotechnology use. Thank you.
Okay, yes.
Can we add a little something if we wish to, if we feel it's really significant to the EIR?
Has it been said before?
No.
Okay, why don't you go ahead?
What I
Lynn Feinerman, Feinerman, from Marin. And what I'd like to add is that I think that it's clear to those of you who are scientists, you probably know this already, that whenever tests have been attempted to determine the level of, shall we say, infestation of chemicals in water, that there are certain chemicals that just are not detectable. They can't be determined in terms of how many there are or even whether they exist in the water. And a lot of those chemicals come from chlorinated pesticides, chlorine-based pesticides. And among the chlorine-based pesticides are included elements such as toluene and benzene. And these chemicals cannot be tested for. And so I want a caveat, at least, if this EIR is published, that the scientists really cannot do appropriate testing for these chemicals. They cannot be detected by any known human tests, not by carbon testing, not by anything. Thank you.
And Maurice,
Since so many people are concerned about toxic impacts on bees, and that's ad hoc committee included, there are other toxins which are being used for other eradications, and perhaps the CDFA can find a way to incorporate this into this review, is comparing what you're proposing here with things that are being done right now. And one of those toxins that people need to know about is a substance called imidacloprid, which was proposed for the glassy-winged sharpshooter control issue, which is highly toxic to honeybees. And I, for one, would like to know the extent to which imidacloprid is being used for the glassy-winged sharpshooter program because of its high toxicity to honeybees, and speculate whether or not imidacloprid is responsible. That is it's a substance that is marketed for flea control on dogs. It's one of the most widely used flea control techniques around, and anybody who has a dog is probably using it. Thank you.
Today's, your verbal comments are not the only opportunity. If you think of something else and you want to send it in via email or on this form, fax it in, send it in, that's fine as well. Just get it in, if you would, by the date. And again, the date is the 21st of August. And it doesn't matter, if it comes email or fax or sent in. It's all the same. What they will do is take the comments, they'll put them into groups, and they will include those topics in their review. There will be a draft environmental impact report that will come out, and again, it was indicated, and there will be additional meetings.